Hi everyone, I'm Dr Nadine Hamilton from Love Your Pet, Love Your Vet, and welcome to our brand new mini-series of webinars, Thriving and Surviving in the Veterinary Profession. We're bringing to you a host of expert speakers from in and around the veterinary profession and those who are passionate about the profession, as well as myself. We've got some nutritionists, we've got exercise physiology coming into it, we've got some sleep experts, and we've also got our amazing lineup of veterinary professionals, both here from Australia and also from overseas. Today's special guest, who I'm thrilled to be able to welcome you to and introduce you to, is Christina Louise, who is a vet nurse from here in Australia. She's very passionate about dealing with workplace bullying and addressing psychological safety in the workplace. She's done a number of studies and research into this topic, and we'll be sharing more of that with you today and some of the things that you can do, and also doing some further research. So there's going to be a link at the end of the presentation, and I'll also make sure that we share it when we're sharing our information with you, to be able to enable us to get some more research around some of the issues that are going on. So I'm thrilled to be able to have Christina here joining us today, and I will hand over to Christina now to obviously do a better introduction than I probably have, but also to share your amazing insights with us. And again, you know, your experience as a vet nurse and coming at this, you know, from the veterinary profession. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I'm really happy to be here and be able to chat with you today. Okay. All right. Can you see the screen there okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Great. All right. So my presentation today, I'm going to talk about psychological safety in the workplace. It has a big bearing on how we present ourselves, how we perform, and how we feel at the end of the day when we go home. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. Okay, I'll just quickly tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a country girl. I'm middle-aged. I'm getting on up there in my age. I'm a wife and a stepmom. My stepdaughter has a couple of little kids, so technically I'm a grandma. I've spent 30 years in the workforce, nearly a decade in the veterinary profession. So I've done 5 years in general practice. I was teaching for about 1.5 years, and I've spent nearly the last 3 years in specialty surgery, which I love. I'm still studying. I've got a couple of veterinary diplomas, but at the moment I'm studying with the Australian sorry,
Institute.
That's
Institute
it.
of,
yeah.
Yeah.
AI. Yeah.
Professional counsellors, is it?
Yeah, I'm currently doing a diploma of counselling with the AIPC. I'm a part-time muso. I like to do a few gigs here and there. I play the guitar, and I'm a word warrior, so I love writing. And just before the lockdown started, I was running some creative writing classes for people that wanted to do a little bit of personal empowerment. So that kind of happened in person just before lockdown, and I'm looking at maybe moving those classes online from here on. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of this presentation. So firstly, we're going to talk about what is psychological safety, and then we're going to talk about what does that look like in the workplace for different employees. And then we're going to look at the things that might interfere with psychological safety, and that might be related to interpersonal conflict and why that happens, and how we can diagnose different types of conflict that might be going on, and how to resolve some of that. We're going to look at then whose responsibility is it to sort those problems out, and we're going to look at tackling those problems. And then as we get close to the end, we'll look at support services and list of resources, and then some contact options if anyone wants to get in touch with me. Okay, so to start off with, I just want to talk about the aims of the presentation. First up, its purpose today is to educate, because education gives us the tools to live by. And number two, empowerment. Empowerment helps us, knowledge makes us stronger, makes us resilient. And then in terms of the third goal of the presentation, we're looking at evolution. So to sum up those three things, knowledge gives us the power to make positive change. So we really want to move forward and make some better changes. Psychological safety. So what is it exactly? I want to refer here to some research that was done recently in the last couple of years by the Google Corporation. We all know it's a massive corporation. They want what every other business wants. They want money, success, power. They want a good reputation. So they put a lot of time and effort and money into doing research to look at some high performance teams. And they wanted to find out what makes those teams effective and what makes those teams successful in the business. So after 2 years of work and looking at 180 different teams, they found that there were 5 traits that all of those teams had in common. 4 of those traits they weren't really surprised by, but number 5 was psychological safety, and they found that that had it played an enormous impact on whether or not that team was successful. So just going to look at what the results are for people in that situation, if someone's feeling that they are safe in that environment or if they're not feeling safe in that environment. So referring here to a couple of the several articles in the references at the end of the presentation, but I'm referring here to some research that was done in America, first in North Carolina and then in Washington. So in terms of feeling safe, they found that feeling psychologically safe in the workplace would lead to open-mindedness and resilience and motivation, sometimes more humour in that environment. Conversely, the alternative was also true. So feeling of being unsafe in that environment, feeling blamed, criticised, victimised would lead to feelings of conflict and behaviour that was defensive and would lead to people becoming less motivated, less engaged in their work. So. Okay. So in terms of feeling safe and unsafe in a workplace, I'm just going to refer here to this quote by Dutch psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk. It says that being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health, and safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. So that's something I really want to dig into here with the presentation today, that whether we're feeling safe or unsafe and what that looks like in a practical sense. So leading on from Dr. van der Kolk's quote there, I'm just going to look at, in the veterinary profession, we tend to work in team dynamics. So I'm going to look at a couple of hypothetical teams, and we're going to call them, for convenience, we're going to call them Team A and Team B. So Team A, we're looking at people who work together, who share resources, have open communication, and the team members quite openly, happily help each other. Team B is going to be a different kind of team. So the members of Team B are then driven by competition, behaviours are more selective, and their interactions are more disrespectful. So just going to give you a couple of examples then of what that might look like for somebody who's working in Team A and working in Team B. All right, so just to illustrate what psychological safety looks like in these two different environments, I'm going to give you a circumstance of a hypothetical nurse that might be working in Team A or Team B. And you may or may not, you know, the people watching this presentation may or may not have seen this in real life. It certainly happens. Okay, I'll just talk to you about the nurse in Team A. So she's been having a difficult week for personal reasons. Her workmates knew this was the case. So when she was asked to participate in a particularly challenging euthanasia, a couple of her colleagues asked her quietly, you know, would you like us to step in for you? Would you like us to do this one? You know, you can step out for this one. So the nurse in question, she felt that these others were approaching her from a place of sincerity and concern for her well-being, so she gratefully accepted. She took responsibility for looking after herself. She made a good decision. She accepted some practical support from her teammates. Let's do that same thing again, but with Team B. So put that same nurse in that situation. So nurse in Team B, she's been having a difficult week for personal reasons. Her workmates know she's been having a difficult week, but their care factor's pretty low. So when she's asked to assist in a particularly challenging euthanasia, she doesn't feel comfortable asking anyone to step in for her. So instead, she feels obligated to participate in that. After the procedure, she comes out of that consult room visibly emotional, and a couple of her colleagues, they're seeing her crying, and they kind of laugh at her and they say, oh, you need to toughen up. And so the result of that is not only did she feel the distress of going through that euthanasia procedure, but then she also felt humiliated by her peer group, so her workmates. So let's do a little quick inventory of those behaviours. So from Team A, we're getting expressions of maturity, high emotional intelligence, professionalism, respect for a colleague, and a display of compassion. So the nurse in Team A experienced a high degree of psychological safety. From Team B, we got expressions of immaturity, low emotional intelligence, lack of professionalism, disrespect for a colleague, and a lack of compassion. So the nurse in Team B obviously experienced a lack of psychological safety in that situation. That's just one minor example, but you get the idea. So people are dealing every day with different situations in different clinic and hospital environments. So we've got to look at how they're being impacted and why that's happening. So, all right. So I want to talk quickly about selecting a workforce. So when you're building a team, or when a company's building a team, and you can see this in the job adverts that are put out there on the job seeking networks, the companies are actually, they have a list of criteria that they really want from an incoming employee, so your workforce selection. So you're looking at things like, or they're looking at things like, they want someone to come into the business to bring appropriate skills, adequate knowledge. They want high efficiency habits and good time management. They want problem solving abilities. They want good common sense. They want someone that's got high integrity, a positive attitude, someone that's highly personable, so they get along well with the team, low conflict tendencies, someone who's a good communicator, and someone that's got a strong team focus. So that's just a small selection of what a business might want when they're bringing someone into the team. We don't always get what we want. And, you know, we're always on our best behaviour when we're going for a job interview. So, you know, and things happen in our lives that change our behaviours from time to time as well. So we've got to be realistic and be honest about who we are and how we express ourselves in the world. But it's definitely going to be difficult to find all those attributes in one person. But let's consider for a minute like how the workforce has changed over time. Now, I had this conversation with someone just recently, and they pointed out to me that years ago, a business would bring people in, and if those people were good people, good quality people, and they were making positive contributions to the team at both an emotional level and a practical level, so they were good workers and they were good quality people, they would stay. But if someone was working at a satisfactory level, or even at a high level, but they were bringing discord to the team, the company would normally let them go. So things have changed a little bit over the years, and in this day and age, you know, a lot of businesses are driven by their KPIs and you know, by their shareholder expectations, and so often companies are willing to overlook some really bad behaviour as long as their targets, their end goals are being met financially. So that's something that each business has to make a decision for themselves. And don't get me wrong, like making money obviously is important for businesses. It's crucial, in fact, otherwise the business doesn't run. But if employees doing, you know, a good job, but they are a high conflict personality, they're still going to cost the company money, because it decreases their value as an employee. It's going to lead to lowered team efficiency because the other team members are going to lose motivation and disengage from their work. You might get an increased number of sick days because no one wants to be around that person. And eventually, you know, the business is going to get a reputation for having a high staff turnover. So it does have a negative impact in the end. And what I want to look at with this particular slide is I came across a really good book a couple of years ago called Rising Above a Toxic Workplace, and I'll put that information in the references, how to get hold of that book. It was written by a bunch of authors, 3 male authors. They've got a really interesting chart in that book that does a quick comparison between functional personalities and dysfunctional personalities. Now, the complete list is about 14 characteristics long, but I've just put a really brief comparison of them here to show just a few of what they were looking at in the book. So someone who's highly functional, and as a human being, functional in the world and functional socially with other people, you're going to get honest communication. They're going to express a sense of responsibility about their work. They're going to focus on a team. They're going to act with authenticity, and they're going to respect other people's boundaries. Now, conversely to that, you're going to get, sometimes there's going to be dysfunctional persons coming into a team that might be deceitful with their communication. They might have a sense of entitlement. They're going to focus on themselves rather than the team. They're going to be preoccupied with image, and they're going to communicate in ways that use guilt and manipulation to divert ideas and to get people to do things that they want them to do in the ways that they want them to do them. So I thought that was really interesting in that particular book that I read, that they were just so clear. The clarity was there about this is a good quality person and this is not a good quality person, and they just laid it all out there in black and white. So that was really interesting to look at that list and make some assessments of not just other people, but even, you know, also to read it and to look at yourself and like, where have I stepped out of integrity, and, you know, on which occasions was I the dysfunctional person in that circumstance. Okay, so I'm going to move into a little bit of a different area at the moment. On the left here, I've just got a quote here that says, most trauma occurs in the context of interpersonal relationships, by someone called Pat Ogden. But I want to build on that because in listening to a lot of podcasts from different psychologists, I've come across this particular quote by a lady in America, Dr. Ramani Durvasula. And what she says is, what we don't have a model for in mental health is people who make other people uncomfortable through their conduct. And that's a really important quote there, because what we're looking at in a work environment is people who are struggling to interact with each other in a healthy way. So a few years ago, 2015, I think it was, I was doing some studies for a vet nursing diploma, and I was doing some research into what the different stressors were in the workplace. And at that particular time, with the group of people that I surveyed, it became apparent that human interactions were one of the things that caused a lot of stress for veterinary professionals in that environment. So as much as we look at all the other things like, you know, maybe the money aspect of the job and the euthanasias that we have to participate in, I think we also have to look at our interpersonal interactions and look at how much that's actually impacting on us as human beings, whether or not we feel safe in that environment. So I've got a book here that's also in the references at the end, called The Empathy Trap. It's an incredible book written by a husband and wife team. And it's only a really small book, but they've actually looked at the population as a whole and split it up into, say, you've got 40% of people who behave, well, they refer to people as empaths and apaths. You've got 40% of people who are empaths and nearly 60% of people who are apaths. So I'm not sure that that's like kind enough to people. I'd probably, rather than labeling people, I'd probably prefer to say, look, 40% of people behave with empathy and maybe nearly 60% of people behave with apathy. So I'm just going to talk about that a little bit. So what does that look like in a work environment? So I'll give you a quick example. Imagine for a minute that one of your workmates has just had like a personal trauma. You know, perhaps they've had a death in the family, they might have had a miscarriage, something awful's gone on, and that person's still trying to come to work, trying to do their best. the empathic person is going to respond to that situation by saying, oh my goodness, that's really sad. I hope they're okay. I wonder if they'd like to talk about it. And that's really an empathic response to that person who might be struggling. The apathetic response would be, oh, you know, that's not my problem. I don't care. That person needs to be here to do a job, and if they can't do their job, they shouldn't be here. It's kind of like, well, you know, where do you go with that? So there's the person in question, the person that might be experiencing a little bit of discord in their life. They're going to have those two different responses coming at them. So I guess in that respect, we're going to be looking at, you know, how people can fortify themselves against those kind of responses a little bit later in the presentation. But this is kind of what I mean with the comparison between, say, an empathic response or an apathetic response. So, and that's really, you know, if you've got someone that really leans towards showing empathy or leans towards being apathetic, then I don't know that there's much you can do to change someone's personality. You've got to decide how healthy that team is for you and whether or not you need to be there, whether you whether you fit into that team or whether you just need to walk away. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. Okay. All right. With regard to interpersonal conflict, I just think here there are ways we can kind of look at this that don't demonize people, but that make a practical assessment of what's happening and why, and are we being targeted, or is someone just having a bad day and we just need to like give them some breathing space. So in terms of diagnosing someone who's being unreasonable, let's just look at a two-stage sort of profiling system. So I like to do an inventory, and maybe even this could be done in a written format. You've got a written inventory. All right, and writing it down has a few benefits. So it helps you organise your thoughts. It can help you put things in perspective. It can help you identify patterns in someone's behaviour that may or not be like maladaptive patterns. And if those interactions are increasing or intensifying, then you've got it's a pattern there that you can identify as well. That's important. Worst case scenario, if things get really out of hand and you find yourself in a dangerous place, and you've also got a record of some of the things that have been going on, and that can be important down the track if you need it, which hopefully you don't, but it's handy to have there. Okay. So in going through, so when I talk about like a two-stage sort of inventory, first thing I'm going to do is a quick profile of the person's personality and who they are, where they're coming from, just so I can step into their shoes and try and look at things from their point of view and try and understand how they're feeling and why they might be acting or reacting the way that they are. So that's the first bit. And then the second part of it's going to be an assessment of behaviours. So just for a minute, I want to look at the profiling. Number one, personality type. What type of personality are they? There's a couple of different ways to do it. So some of the companies, some of the veterinary educational companies like to educate about the DISC profiling system, which talks about people's different personality types in accordance with their level of strength and assertiveness and how they present themselves in the world, and that's cool. Another one that's really good is like the Myers-Briggs personality test, which is really helpful. So in some way there needs to be an acknowledgement of what type of personality you're dealing with in this person that's in front of you. So are they a strong person? Are they an alpha person? Are they a direct person? Or are they very passive? Like, what is it? Are they insecure? Are they reacting from a place of insecurity? Or are they reacting from a place of dominance, needing to be dominant? So all of that will come into it when you're looking at someone's personality. And then, you know, are they coming from an empathic place, or are they sort of behaving with a bit of apathy? And that's, you know, they're not very kind, but that's just how they are. You got to look at cultural background. I can tell you this right now, I come from a big family. I have European heritage. When we get together, we're loud, we talk a lot, and we're very demonstrative. We talk a lot with our hands. So I know sometimes I've been in work situations and the group has found me a little bit abrasive because I am loud and I do talk a lot and I like to sing while I work. So all of that can be a little bit off-putting to other people who come from backgrounds where, you know, I think perhaps some cultures are more reserved. They're quieter, more conservative, and maybe it just doesn't feel comfortable for them to have somebody loud in the team that likes to laugh and likes to talk a lot. You know, that can be a bit interfering in their processes, their train of thought. If they're trying to concentrate and you've got someone chattering away all the time, that can be annoying. So I acknowledge that, you know, about myself. Past trauma triggers are also going to be impacting on someone and the way they express themselves in a work situation. So if you've had, you know, particularly someone that's had childhood trauma, adverse childhood events, you might go into these maladaptive patterns where even through your adult life, you're going to respond in ways that are unhelpful just because that's what your body is programmed to do. And you know, the best way, I guess, to deal with that is to do work on yourself, a bit of self-reflection and a bit of healing work and growth work as well. And then just look at maybe current pressures. Is that person dealing with some stuff that you're not aware of, or maybe you are aware of, but you're not cutting them a bit of slack? So everyone's, you know, life is a complex thing and everyone's coming from different places. And, you know, someone might be having a good day one day and then the next day they snap at you and you're like, oh, all right, look, I know something's going on with them, so I'm not going to take it to heart. I'll just like brush it off, and then hopefully the next day they'll be feeling better and it won't happen again. So there's all of that. So you need to have a good understanding of the person that's in front of you. Like, be compassionate, show some empathy, and try and understand what their life is like, how they're feeling, why they're behaving the way they are. So that's the first part of it. So assessment, when you're looking at yourself and behaviours that you're receiving from the outside world, you need to be honest in the way you look at this as well. So if that person's targeting you with unpleasant behaviours, you need to look at that and go, well, are they treating everyone the same way, or is it just the way they're treating me? So if they treat everyone the same way, then you're not being targeted. That's, you know, that's just how it is. This thing that's happening to me, is it a one-time thing that's happened that's made me upset, or is this a repeated pattern that's ongoing and I'm feeling it sort of week after week, day after day, and the same behaviours coming at me all the time? So is it general or is it specific to you? Is it a one-off or is it a constant pattern? So all of this kind of thing, you need to be able to look at that with honesty and get some clarity. That's where it's good to write all this stuff down. So and also negative behaviours, are they coming from one particular individual, or are you receiving those from like a group of people? Is it coming to you from like 3 or 4 people in the same work group? Like, you know, that could be a problem as well. And then you need to look at, well, why, what's going on, or how am I contributing to that? What am I doing that's like inviting that behaviours, or am I not standing up for myself? Or, you know, what are the things that are impacting on that or allowing that to happen? So you don't want to be an enabler as well, because that's not helpful. So, and the behaviours, are they exposed behaviours or are they hidden behind closed doors? So if you're being humiliated, is that happening in front of everyone? Or is that being done quietly and you feel it, but nobody else sees it happening? So anything that's kind of deceitful and quiet and hidden, that's always a bit of a worry. And are these behaviours, are they building in intensity, or is it just something that sort of rolls along here and there, it comes and goes, but it's not a permanent thing. It's not consistent and it's not getting any worse. It's just rolling along over time. So these are all the things you need to look at when you're kind of assessing, well, am I in a good place? Am I attracting this? And what do I need to do to fix it? If I'm playing a part in it, what do I need to do to sort it out? And am I looking at it honestly and putting things in perspective? You don't want to be accused of being oversensitive, but you do also need to be looking at things accurately and making a full assessment and an honest assessment of what you're feeling, what you're going through. So, all right, slide number 10. Okay, so I want to talk about workplace environments and how they can impact on people. and how that happens. Like a lot of the things that I've been reading the last couple of years indicates that it always comes from the top down. So your healthy leadership, you want to build, so someone in a leadership position wants to build a culture in the workplace that's inclusive of all members. They want to have good team building, open communications between everybody. They want to express fair decision making. They want to encourage a positive atmosphere. They want to provide constructive feedback to everyone. They want to embrace like flexibility and invite new ideas, and they want to have good problem solving skills as well. So the photo that's on this slide is a fridge magnet that I have here at home. And I think these are some really lovely qualities, and this is something that I think would very much be applied to a work situation. And it says, admire without jealousy, praise without flattery, follow without imitating, and lead without manipulating. So I just think that's good advice. Slide 10. Okay, so we're looking here on the screen at some examples of healthy leadership. So what are we looking at if we're looking at the opposite of that? So if we've got some unhealthy leadership, you're going to look at things like there's a distinct hierarchy in the business. There's divisive behaviour. There's secrecy, dishonesty. There's favouritism amongst the staff. There's very rigid positions, and there's a lot of assignment of blame rather than people taking accountability. So what kind of damage can that do? Most importantly, unsatisfactory leadership is going to enable bad behaviours. So by enabling, I'm just referring to the way bad behaviours can be overlooked, and if problems aren't addressed, then that can really snowball and get out of hand. Okay, and no one really wants to talk about it, but we need to talk about the B word. So workplace bullying is something that goes on. It happens everywhere. Unfortunately, there is some of it that happens in the veterinary profession, and we can't have a conversation about psychological safety without, unfortunately, addressing the bullying word. Quoting here from the Heads Up website, an Australian website, it's estimated that the cost to the Australian organisations of business is between $6 and $36 billion a year. So we'll look at that on the next slide, but that's fairly substantial. Given that workplace bullying is more characterised by verbal and emotional abuse rather than physical abuse, we come back to the psychological safety again. So we need to first clarify what bullying is and what it isn't. And the Heads Up website has a quote there that says, workplace bullying is repeated and unreasonable behaviour directed towards an employee or a group of employees that creates a risk to their health and safety. So that's from an Australian website, and there are a few different definitions floating around. But I'll talk just briefly about the direct and the indirect behaviours that go on. Direct, we're going to be looking at, say, humiliation, belittling, excessive criticism. And criticisms in the workplace, if it's bullying related, they're going to be more personal attacks rather than like against someone's character, rather than just saying, oh, look, you know, your work's below par, or you're not working up to scratch, or you're not up to speed. So it's going to be more personal. You know, occasionally someone will be called incompetent, but often it's more like personal, about personal negative comments about who they are and how they express themselves. Indirect behaviours. So at the other side, the other end of the scale, someone might be ignored, they might be excluded, they might be isolated, slandered, defamed. Sometimes there'll be rumour mongering going on in the background that you have no control over. When that narrative is running in the background, that can do a lot of damage to people's psyches, because they know it's happening and you don't know what's being said and there's nothing you can do about it. So, and that unfortunately attacks people's reputations as well. So sadly, one of the hallmarks of bullying behaviour is it's always carried out with the intention to cause harm, to make another human being feel inferior, and that's toxic behaviour. So I've put a little note here on the screen saying, don't underestimate it, identify what you're dealing with. Toxic behaviours in the workplace are destructive and they can be deadly. So some research there from the University of Phoenix carried out 2016 indicated that almost 75% of the employees that they surveyed had been affected by bullying in their workplace, either as a target or as a witness. And that's important to point out as well, because it's not just the targeted person who's affected, the people that are watching that going on are also impacted by that. Okay, so talk about the consequences now of being in a harmful environment. So the consequences for the company are up here on the screen, as I mentioned with the last slide. So in Australia, they're talking about $6 to $36 billion a year in lost productivity. And that's determined by increased absenteeism, so people not showing up, poor employee morale, the company's spending lots of money on claims like workforce bullying claims or defending claims, and then you've got a high staff turnover, so you've got all the fees that go along with looking for new people, training new people, any errors that get made while someone's learning a new job. You lost efficiency because the new people coming in aren't up to speed yet, so all of that contributes to the money that's being lost in productivity because of unhealthy environments. From an individual perspective, you're looking at how a person is affected by an unhealthy environment. You're going to end up with that person experiencing things like anxiety and depression. So you've got mental health issues, number one, physical health issues, because the body and mind are connected. And then from a work point of view, you've got lower productivity. And then because of your working team dynamic, you've got a flow-on effect that your teammates are affected, the organisation might be affected, that person takes their problem or that pain home with them at night, it affects their family, it affects their home life, and it really does. The impacts just go on and on and on, and everything just snowballs if things aren't rectified. This image here on the left is my very basic outline of what the human brain might look like. There's a couple of different things that happen. So when an individual's under chronic stress, there's a couple of things that happen inside the brain. So you've got here the amygdala and the hippocampus. I'll see if we can get some info here. All right, so there's a neuroscientist, Dr. Rhonda Freeman, and I've been reading a lot of her work last couple of years. She says stress and trauma are known to cause changes in the brain, not just changes in the chemicals that are released, but also changes to the brain's anatomy. So chronic stress causes a shrinking of the hippocampus and enlargement of the amygdala, and both of these affect your processing and your functioning. So amygdala gets bigger and hippocampus gets smaller. Quick anatomy lesson. The hippocampus is involved with learning and memory, and the amygdala processes emotions, including fear, anger, and overwhelm. Therefore, there are some tangible consequences for the human that's having these changes in the brain as a result of chronic stress. And some of the outcomes might be, you've got cognitive deficits, so that might be the inability to absorb new information, the inability to learn new tasks, and you can imagine how that impacts someone in a working environment if you're asked to do a new job. Significant memory loss, and that usually translates as an inability to recall recent events. So you can imagine how that translates, particularly in a medical environment where you have to remember medications and processes. Reduced executive ability. So for some people that might even mean getting tongue-tied when you're trying to speak. And also emotional dysregulation. So these changes in the brain cause a lot of this this stuff inside the human body. So the person who's having emotional dysregulation then is going to have increased reactivity. So they might even end up behaving in ways that are not normal for that person to behave. It's very out of character for someone, you know, to have extreme irritability or anger when they don't normally seem to be an angry person. So it's going to impact on them as a human being. So for someone who finds themselves at that point, that means a lot of damage has already been done. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to get to a place of good functioning again. So what we ultimately want to do is prevent that, that degree of damage from taking place. Okay, I want to talk now about responsibility. So this slide and the next 3 slides are going to look at whose responsibility is this, and we're going to look at maybe some solutions to counteract some of the damage. So, all right, so I've got a quote here from Perry Belcher, which says that nothing will kill a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one. So that's kind of pointing to the number 1 here on this page, 1, 2, and 3. So number 1 is management. What role does management play in the unhealthy environments that develop in a business? So ideally, I guess they want to stay alert to imbalances of power within a work team, because normally it's an imbalance of power that that contributes to negativity that shows up in bullying. So number 2, colleagues. We're going to look at how colleagues can support each other, because social support has been identified as a crucial part of people get through it and getting over it. And then number 3, the self, looking at taking personal responsibility through self-care. Okay, number 1 of these 3. So when you're looking at management, first of all, the company, there's a lot of evidence that says that a good example for the company environment needs to be set from the top. And I'm quoting here from an article by Christine Comerford in 2016 that was published on the Forbes website. The reality is that the leadership team is responsible. Bullying cannot happen without approval. And it's up to you to create an environment that is safe and healthy for the entire team. So again, when we're talking about safety, we're talking about psychological safety. It's not just about physical safety, it's about psychological safety for the employees. And also from the Beyond Blue Foundation, they've done a lot of research as well, which strongly indicates that poor organisational culture and a lack of leadership are the main drivers of bullying behaviours in the workplace. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what management can do. And then I'll read these couple of quotes on the screen there. So what avenues can a company leadership or management team, what can they do to address bad behaviour? First of all, they can arrange one-on-one meetings between the offending party, as well as meetings between the manager and the individual that feels they're being targeted. So open door policies from management are excellent, because it lets employees know that they've got somewhere to turn if they're having troubles or if they're feeling the effects of bad behaviour from others. When you genuinely listen to what people have got to say, you actually help to build psychological safety in that person. Sometimes there'll be human resources people on the floor. And sometimes in the bigger companies, they'll have talent acquisition specialists. You've got all sorts of people that are involved in human resource management. Mediation's always an option, but if compromises can't be reached, then maybe external support and mitigation things might need to be sought from outside the company. Companies can bring in representatives from outside to sort out interpersonal conflict. I was in a company about 20 years ago. It was not in the veterinary profession. And one of the young men there carried out some inappropriate behaviour on one of the female staff members. And his intentions were not malicious at all, but the impact it made on her was quite intense, very negative for her. So the results of that were twofold. The young man had to be relieved of his working role. And secondly, the company took responsibility, brought in a government department, and which I think might have been like WorkSafe Victoria. And there was a compulsory training session for all staff members relating to sexual harassment in the workplace. So that's just something that a company can do, and they can reach out to other departments. If the company doesn't have the skills and resources to moderate a situation, they can bring in external parties to come and solve that problem for them. And really, sometimes education might just be their solution for some of the conflict that's going on. You can bring in, companies can bring in organisational consultants as well to talk to employees and to talk to management teams as well about how to manage work groups. That's very valuable to leadership. Obviously the leadership team, if they're communicating respectfully and professionally to all the other staff members, that's leading by example. So regardless of the position in the workplace. It sets the precedent for what's being expected in the way of professional conduct. I know a business owner, it is a vet clinic, who's got a poster in his in the common room in the business, and he's got a big horizontal line drawn across the poster. So if there's any conflict between staff members, he takes them to the poster and he says, "Is your behaviour above the line or below the line?" And I really like that. I really like that strategy. I think it's really useful because it's a constant visual reminder there for people to check their behaviour, and it asks for personal accountability. But it's also a really simple, it's a simple thing to do. It's a little bit quirky, but I think it's, for him, it's quite effective in the way he runs his business, and everyone thinks he's a lovely man, and he is. So if management knows there are some team members who want to make positive change in the workplace for promoting well-being in the company, management and leadership can always encourage that too. So if you've got people in the business who want to make good changes for that business, for the well-being of all the staff members, bring them in, like let them do their thing, talk to them about their projects, and encourage them to bring some of that positivity into their work teams. That's a really good thing. And the quotes here on the screen, the first one up the top is from a lady who runs a podcast, Dawn Marie Westmoreland. And she was having a conversation with an organisational consultant, an American man. And she made the comment, when you go in there and you teach leaders how to be empathetic and to be good leaders to their employees, what you're doing is creating a safe, positive, respectful work environment. And that's what everyone needs. That's what everyone wants. So I think that was just a lovely quote that I wanted to add there. And also from the Heads Up website, which is Australian, good leadership builds a positive, respectful work culture where bullying is not tolerated. Okay. Colleagues. Colleagues have an enormous part to play in supporting each other. Now I got onto WorkSafe Victoria, and they've given me permission to use their poster there. So the workplace bullying poster, which says if you don't step in, you're supporting it. And the lovely book that I quoted from before called The Empathy Trap, they also have a similar mentality to that. So apathy equates to collusion. So you've got to be there for the people that need you. If you see something going on and you choose to look the other way or walk the other way or even participate in it, then you know you're part of the problem, you're not part of the solution. Okay, so colleagues, general employers, how do you be a good supportive colleague to someone else? There are a few good ways to do that. Number one is by letting them know that you care how they're going. If you see someone struggling, be sure to check in with them and ask them if they're okay, and be sincere about it, because people know if you're just sort of brushing them off. The one thing you want to avoid is allowing someone in your team to feel isolated, because isolation is something that expresses lack of psychological safety. It's often the starting point also for a downward spiral. So if you behave with kindness and respect, it gives psychological safety to somebody else. So make yourself approachable. Promotional events within the company are always a good thing to participate in. So the businesses now acknowledge World Mental Health Day, and we also have Are You OK Day. So go ahead and participate in those activities, show support for any wellbeing activities in the company that tells your peers that you're concerned about their mental health. It tells them that their mental health is important to you. That shows people that you care. I've got a few friends that work long hours in emergency, and working shift work is always, it always adds an extra layer of personal challenge. So one of them, a vet, is actually proactive in introducing a lot of wellbeing initiatives into her workplace. She organises group yoga sessions, and recently she organised all the vets to write appreciation notes to the nursing staff. And I can tell you the impact it made on the staff was enormous, and it really lifted the morale in the team for quite a while. So the other thing that you can do, Mental Health First Aid Australia have courses now where you can become accredited as a mental health first aider. So that's available to everybody. I did mine late last year, and I think at that point they said about 3 million people in Australia had already gone through the accreditation process. So that's a wonderful thing to do for yourself personally, but also in a workplace. The more people in the workplace that have gone through that mental health first aid course, everyone's going to be on the same page. If everyone understands what the risks are and how to solve problems, that's really going to add value to the business. It's really going to lift the atmosphere of the teams that you're in. So my takeaways, I think, from this is that if you've got a colleague that's not doing so well or is starting to become isolated in a team, be there for moral support. Step in on their behalf. Don't stay silent, because if you look the other way, then you're participating in that person's downfall as well. Okay, and the self. All right, so I know, Nadine, like in your lovely book, you've gone through a whole lot of stuff there about how people can practice self-care. So I'm not going to go into too much of that here because it'll be a bit repetitive. I do just want to point out a couple of things that I've read recently, which I've listed there on the screen. So neuroscientist Dr. Alex Korb, he recommends sunlight, exercise and social support as his three main takeaways, and respectively therefore vitamin D for serotonin, dopamine and oxytocin. So oxytocin is like the bonding hormone, and that's the one that you feel when you have psychological safety with someone else, when you have a healthy, positive connection with someone else, that's what you're going to get. So, and then psychotherapist Dr. Linda Martinez-Louis, she is a trauma recovery expert. She recommends a combination of the following. So good quality sleep, good nutrition, exercise, spend time in nature, meditation, breath work, creative activities, and some quality time alone. And that all of that to help restore the parasympathetic nervous system. Just want to do a quick shout out to the lovely people that I've been working with the last couple of years. This photo here on the left was a gift that they gave me recently. They know how much I'm invested in positive workplace dynamics and self-care, and so they've given me this lovely little mindfulness toolkit, which was so kind. Okay. Self-protection. When we're talking about self-care, I just want to do this one slide. We're nearly at the end of the presentation, but I just want to do this one slide on self-protection because this is some strategies here I want to put forward to people who find themselves in the danger zone. Self-care is the one thing that you do have control over, but if you find yourself unfortunately in a dangerous situation, then you can be doing all the self-care in the world and it's not necessarily going to save you from a difficult, dangerous environment. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things here. What might constitute a dangerous environment? So if you're in the danger zone, that's basically any situation where somebody is deliberately trying to cause harm to you and get some level of enjoyment from causing harm to you. And that includes any situation where anyone's trying to play mind games with you as well. That's always pretty dark and dangerous territory because it indicates malicious intent. And I've got a link in the references to something called gaslighting behaviour. Gaslighting in the workplace is a thing. It does happen and it causes a lot of damage to people. That's when someone's lost all their psychological safety. So I just needed to reference that here. If you find yourself in that situation, I would recommend that the first thing you do before you tell anyone, go to your GP, get a referral to see a specialist psychologist and talk to somebody that understands, that can identify the behaviours for you and then give you some strategies to either get through it or get out of it. But you do need some support, some tools to protect yourself against some of the darker stuff that goes on. Unfortunately, the research indicates that when the behaviour gets really dark like that, it's often taking place behind closed doors, so without other people knowing. And if you try to talk to colleagues or leadership about it, no one's going to believe you anyway. So the best thing you can do is talk to a psychotherapist and get the professional opinion of somebody who knows what you're dealing with. One of the telltale signs that someone's in the danger zone is going to be that you're going to see their mental health deteriorate. You're going to see their behaviour change. They're going to become more reactive, or they might become angry, or they might withdraw, they might self-isolate. There might be a range of different things that happen in the character of that person being targeted, but if you're paying attention, you're going to see it, and you're going to know it's not normal for that person. It's way out of what's their normal behaviour. I want to tell you a quick story about one of my nieces. I've got a lot of nieces and nephews. She doesn't work in the veterinary industry, but my lovely niece, she found herself a few years ago in a really unpleasant workplace. She works in real estate. And when we were having this conversation, she said to me afterwards that that job was turning me into a bad person. And she said, I started taking that badness home to my family every night. So she made that decision at that point to resign, and her life got better and everything went back into balance for her. And I really admire her for assessing her situation and rectifying it the way she did. She's a lot younger than me, but she acted with a high level of maturity, and she practiced a really high level of self-respect, and she and her family benefited from that decision that she made, so that was really good. In terms of strategies, so strengthen your thought, practice your self-care and educate yourself, read things, listen to podcasts, watch some YouTube videos. Try not to take things personally. Number 2, refine your support network. Understand that not everyone's got your back, and then choose wisely the type of people you want to surround yourself with. And number 3, exercise some self-respect. So stand up to the bad behaviour. If you're not putting yourself in danger, ask for higher support if you need to, if you feel comfortable doing that. But if you stand up to it and it doesn't stop, and if you ask for help from higher up and you don't get it, you need to look at walking away. And that's about protecting yourself. Okay, getting towards the end now. So in terms of support, I've just put a quote on this page by a guy called Mike Swint. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it may be the strongest thing you ever do. So colleagues and friends, choose people that you trust, people that you are comfortable with, people that give you psychological safety. If you'll know if someone genuinely cares about you and they want the best for you, they're going to check in and make sure you're okay, and they'll be there for you when you want to talk. In terms of organisations, a lot of businesses now have access for their employees to the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. Vets have a lifeline with the AVA, and nurses can go through the VNCA to get support. There's always professional therapists, very good choice. And lots of other services as well, Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and the Suicide Callback Service. So lots of other places you can go. Check in with someone and make sure that someone's watching out for you as well, watching over you. Okay, second last slide. Okay, there is, in the list of references that I've put together, there's a link to a quiz from ETC Consulting. And it's just a simple quiz, 10 questions, and it's how to identify whether or not you're in a toxic workplace. So, you know, that can be really helpful. If you've been somewhere for a while and you're thinking, oh, this doesn't feel right, you know, I'm going into work feeling sick every day, and I'm coming home and I'm feeling emotional every day when I get home, something's not right, and I'm not sure if it's me or if it's them. There's a quiz there. There's a lot of quizzes out there on the internet. I think this one has merit. So I've put a link there to this one where you can actually do a quick assessment of the environment that you find yourself in every day, and look at whether there's unhealthy behaviours going on, and whether or not there's anything you can do to rectify those. Also the survey. So Nadine mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, there is a survey floating around relating to adverse interpersonal behaviours in the veterinary profession. So that will be, a link to that will be in the references as well. And I think Nadine's got a link to that also that she can spread around. And references. I used quite a lot of references to put this presentation together. So books, podcasts, articles, websites and videos, they're all listed. I haven't put them in the presentation because they take up too much room, but there is some a PDF file that's got all of those in it if anyone wants to follow up on any of the information. So finally, just want to say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Nadine, for allowing me the opportunity to put forward all these ideas. Thank you to the viewers that are watching the presentation. If anyone wants to get in touch with me to follow up on any of the themes that I've put forward here, you're welcome to contact me by email at the vet nurse address. Or if anyone's interested in the writing classes for self-empowerment, you can contact me on the Word Warriors address. Or if anyone wants to connect via social media, I do have a LinkedIn page, so you're welcome to pop in and say hello there too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was brilliant. I've got a page full of notes, as I've done for all of the the presentations. So I write notes and I'm like, oh, I like that and I like that. And I did love the little gift that you got, the mindfulness, was it mindfulness toolkit or the toolbox?
Yes, from my workmates, yeah.
Yeah, how beautiful is that? And it's very special, I guess, knowing that, you know, they've recognised that that's something that you're obviously very passionate about and interested in. So, yeah, I love that. I loved everything that you talked about, and I think it is so relevant. And I think some of the things that really stood out, as I said, I've got a page full of notes here, but about knowledge is power, you know, and enables you to change. And I think that that's so important. And I think some of those things, you know, the WorkSafe Australia about if you don't do something about it, you're part of the problem, you know, and you're allowing these things to happen.
Yeah.
You know, people can be frightened about stepping up because of the repercussions or whatever, but if we don't say anything about it, we're reinforcing that behaviour. You know, we don't want to reinforce that negative behaviour because it's sending the message that this is okay. And that's not just obviously within the workplace, it's all like with our colleagues, it's also with our clients or, you know, with people outside of work as well, that, you know, we need to learn how to be assertive and to be able to stand up for ourselves and do that. And I think that quote, you know, and it's something I often talk about, like asking for help is not a sign of weakness. I like the way that Mike had put it there, you know, in fact, it may be the strongest thing you ever do. Like I talk about it as it's actually a strength, you know, and I know when I'm working with somebody, whether they're just reaching out for guidance or whether they're reaching out to work with me, you know, and I admire them and I'll tell them that, you know, like I am so grateful that they have reached out to get that support and to be able to recognize and value their own self-worth and have that self-compassion and that self-respect to be able to do something about it as well. I thought it was really interesting when you're talking about like with this, the safety and connections, you know, when you did the team A versus the team B. I love that comparison that you did there. And I think a lot of what was underlying that as well came back to values. You know, and I know we talk about a lot in acceptance and commitment therapy, but those characteristics, you know, if you're looking for, whether it's, you know, as an employee, characteristics that we're looking for as well, you know, things that we like in people, they do reinforce our values. You know, we're looking for someone who is acting professionally. So it reinforces our value around, we value professionalism in the workplace. You know, so again,
yeah, I think also I should point out, you know, team dynamics can change. They change all the time. Every time you bring someone new in, every time someone leaves, those dynamics change because people feed off each other in the way that they express themselves. So definitely can be fluid over time.
Absolutely. And I think I love the other one I love too was, is your behaviour above the line or below the line? I love it. What a great, like a visual representation, because sometimes we need to see things visually to be able to really go, actually, you know what, maybe I need to bring myself into line, you know, so I'm right there, you know, that I'm really in a good place. And
I thought it was quite funny because it's the kind of thing that a parent might do with a child and say, you know, have a look at your behaviour and where are you acting today, above the line or below the line. But, you know, he's such a lovely man that the people that work with him, they know where he's coming from and they tolerate that and they're like, okay, you're probably right.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. But I think it's also reinforcing some of the positive things you can do as a leader and taking some of those steps on board. And I know, you know, if anyone listens to the webinar that I've recorded with Jane McIntyre, who's a certified practice manager from the US, and we're talking about like leadership, you know, and stepping up. And sometimes you have to make those tough decisions that it's expected of you if you're a leader or a manager. And, you know, one of my theories is, you know, anyone can be a manager, but not everyone can be a leader. There's a huge difference. between good management and good leadership. And I think too, like when you're talking about the B word as well, you know, that was quite astonishing to see, you know, how much money in Australia alone each year is lost to productivity. But all of those things are aligning with things that I actually did in my 4th year psych thesis, which is all around conflict in the workplace, which I guess now is recognised as bullying, you know, a part of that comes into it. And they're all the things that I found from my own research. You know, in fact, I've got a copy of my you know, trust out. You can even see how crusty and yellow it is around the outside. That's how old that is. 2004, I think it was. 2004. You know, that research these things. And again, what happens if there is conflict in the workplace? And essentially, it does lead to that high staff turnover. And, you know, I started doing that topic because I was working in an administrative capacity, you know, as a 4th year psych student. And I was experiencing it. I was experiencing bullying in the workplace and working in a very toxic culture. And there were 7 people in my team that left because of this one person who was a senior. So she was senior to all of us. You know, I worked directly, I was a PA, so I worked directly, you know, with one of the partners in this practice. But unfortunately, I don't know why, but he was, you know, influenced by what this other person was feeding to him all the time. And I ended up, like, that was what actually guided my research, thinking, is there something to this? Because I've done that. I've left, you know, 3 jobs now because of situations going, you know what, I don't need to put up with this. And I think you addressed that in there, like, you make that decision and in the end you make that choice. Do I need to walk away from this? You know, and I've chosen to do that without another job to go to, but just, you know, going out there on a wing and a prayer and hoping it'll all work out, and it always has. But it's like, that's me taking a stand because my psychological well-being and my health is more important than working in a toxic workplace. You know, and it is.
And that's showing self-respect too.
Exactly. And like you said, you know, it has that flow-on effect to those around you and your family. I think when you were saying about your niece, you know, and it does, you bring that home because you come home. And, you know, I remember my husband, who's one of my biggest supporters, you know, he used to say, oh, but I just get a bit tired of hearing about the he said, she said, you know, and I'm like, I get it. But it's like you need to vent because you're so frustrated and you come home, oh my gosh, he said this and she said that. You know, so it was sort of like, okay, what do I need to do when it affects your health and your well-being? And I think, you know, one of the things you said about if you're starting to feel sick at the thought of going to work, you know, I've been there, I've been burnt out myself, you know, in a couple of jobs where it's like, you do literally feel sick at the thought of going into work, you know, and they're 2 of the jobs that I've walked away from and said, I'm not doing it. You know, it's having that self-respect and that self-care.
They say the body has like an innate intelligence, and when something's not right in a situation, the first place you're going to feel it is in your gut.
Absolutely.
People talk about their gut instinct and that's, you know, when you start, something's not right, you start feeling sick, your gut.
Absolutely. Well, it is. It's your instincts. I mean, it's the seat of all your emotions as well, feeds in the gut. And it's also where, you know, all our happy chemicals, our serotonin and our dopamine are formed, you know, and Tori, the nutritionist, she talks about that in her presentation with, you know, the gut is like our second brain. Some people actually call it the first brain. It's like if your gut's not healthy and your serotonin and dopamine and, you know, all of these other chemicals and hormones aren't being released, it's not going to give us that nice, calm, you know, brain. And likewise, that then feeds back through that gut-brain axis. It's so interconnected.
It is.
Really
I just want to make one more point too. You know, we're talking about leadership, and every time you reach out to someone and show support, you know, take some initiative and reach out and do that for someone. Every time you do that, it is actually an act of leadership.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you've raised, and as I was writing down a lot of those quotes and everything, I'm like, oh, I like that and I like that. I hadn't heard it, you know, the empath versus the apath. I haven't actually heard that, and I love that. I'm an empath myself, so I do take a lot of things on board, you know, and I think, you know, because of my own experience with bullying at school and then in the workplace, I think that's why when I see it happening, it gets me so fired up. I know we were talking offline beforehand, and you know, we're having a bit of a joke about being fired up about a few things, you know, because again, I just see this as this huge injustice, and it's sort of like, we can't do this. You
Well,
know,
just to clarify that fully, the empaths and the apaths don't make up 100% of the tally. So there is a small percentage, like they think maybe 1 to 3%, that they would refer to as the sociopathic component.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's when it becomes, yeah, much darker at the other
Mm.
end. So,
Mm.
yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
love, I think, you know, the two of the other quotes you said, bullying cannot happen without approval.
Yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, you know, as we were saying, we're reinforcing that negative behaviour, and
Yeah.
we're allowing it to happen. We're allowing it. We're enabling that kind of behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think I really loved that. You know, nothing will kill a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one. Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting because I've seen it happen.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and I guess, yeah, you've seen it. You know I've experienced it, and I've seen it as well. To just, you can 100%. You know,
Yeah.
it is so true that when it's allowed to happen,
Yeah.
it just doesn't build any trust. It doesn't build respect. You know,
Yeah.
employees think, well, what's the point of me being here, because nothing's going to change.
Yeah, that's
You know?
true.
And it
Yeah.
just makes the environment even worse. And I love too where you'd reference in the psychological safety with Barbara Fredrickson, and a few people would have listened to me talk about the positivity ratio, which is actually Barbara Fredrickson. She's a positive psychologist,
Oh, okay, great.
as well. So she's actually got a book on positivity. It's called Positivity,
Great.
and
Yeah.
she's researched this ratio about when one bad thing happens, we need to outweigh it 3 to 1 with good things.
Yeah.
And that's so she's actually got a little website. You can do an inventory. How many bad things have happened today? All right, how can you count? You know, and counteracting that so that that one negative doesn't consume you, which it tends to do. You know, we buy into, you know, we could have a day full of amazing clients and we just have one. And then it's that one thing that we just go, oh my gosh, you know, it just sets everything off all over again. So we're able to counteract that. It's like, okay, you know, and I've been doing that. You know, there's been situations, you know, sort of going on at the moment that I've found, you know, that I've witnessed happening within this profession, and things that I would see as being very unfair and injustice, being, you know, or an injustice, you know, and it makes me feel sick to my core to think of some of these things happening again, you know, because of, you know, I think it brings back a lot of the bullying, and like, you know, we can't tolerate this kind of behavior. And, you know, so some of the stuff that I've done is to go, I need to focus and use the positivity ratios. It's so coincidental you brought that up, about, okay, well, I need to counteract, you know, this, you know, I've been made aware of this particular situation that I just really don't agree with, and how it's been handled. But how can I now focus on, you know, 3 good things? It doesn't have to be 3 work-related things. You know, it could just be 3 general things, you know, and again, they can just be anything like, great, I've got a delivery coming today from, you know, on some online shopping I did. That's exciting, you know, whatever it is, just to really start. And it truly works. Like, I find it really does work.
Yeah.
I
think it's probably a little bit unfortunate that you have to work so hard to balance up the negative.
Exactly.
You've got to dig deep and find all those good things.
Exactly. You know, and then it just enforces, I think it reinforces a lot of the resilience and our coping mechanisms and all of that. So, but yeah, I absolutely loved loved that. You know, it was so thorough. You know, you've got a lot of evidence there and a lot of the research to back up everything you've done. You know, and as we were saying, we'll have the link for the questionnaire as well, and then if people want the resources as well, they can get in touch. I mean, I can get the PDF and try and link that up as well when we're sharing it, everything as well, so we can have that available if people want to download that. But yeah, absolutely, hopefully, you know, we can encourage people to participate in the questionnaire, because that's only going to help, you know, inform this research even more, so that we can address it and start doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it'll help create more programs for people like yourself to develop programs that benefit the industry and benefit individual people in their progress forward. So,
absolutely. So,
in terms of psychological safety, I just want to make a comment to line it up with what's happening in society at the moment. Just a bizarre thing that's happened with this pandemic. All of a sudden, everyone's lost their safe human connections. It's no longer safe to be around other human beings. So all of a sudden, you know, I've had so many people say to me, I have so much anxiety going to the local store just to get my groceries. No one feels safe around other people anymore. So that's probably another example of a loss of psychological safety.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really good point. And I think it is, because it's something, I don't think, you know, or the majority of us have never been through anything like this before.
Yeah.
And it's a complete upheaval, you know, to our everyday lives and our professional lives as well, and how we're doing things. And, you know, I think there are a lot of good things that are coming out of it. You know, I do like, you know, a little bit of social distancing, I must admit, you know, not having people in my face when I'm at the shops. I do like that. You know, but, and again, I think, you know, for me personally, I'm home based anyway, so I'm super fortunate that for me it's like, well, nothing really seems to have changed, other than obviously the things outside the home that I can't just go and, you know, couldn't get, you know, disinfectant and those sorts of things. And it's like, this is bizarre. Why can't I get disinfectant? You know, all those sorts of things. But again, that whole social connection, you know, which it comes back to just forming that connection. I think you even, I was going to say, you did touch on that, you know, in one of your slides there around, you know, that connection is so important, and it's finding ways to connect. You know, sometimes it's a little bit unique. You know, I know people are getting on House Party, you know, the website, or having these big Zoom meetups and everything to be able to keep that connection happening. You know, it's so important, and reaching out and making it okay, you know, to reach out and get that support. So so thank you again so much. I hope everyone has really enjoyed this. I've loved listening to it, and I love it. It's educational for me too. You know, we're like listening to, like, especially to you, and, you know, with our other speakers that are coming into this series, that, you know, I love it because you've each got your own areas of expertise that, you know, a lot of this is sort of beyond what I'm qualified to do or I've got the time to do. So, you know, I'm loving the whole lot as myself. I'll probably be rewatching all of these myself, because I just find them so educational and informative, and certainly very helpful. So
look, I appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you, and hopefully the attendees have found something, or the viewers have found something valuable in here. In, you know, diagnosing and rectifying any interpersonal conflicts, and knowing the value of like self-care and self-respect, and hopefully that makes everyone a little bit stronger.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So, so thank you again. Loved having you on here, and for that brilliant presentation.
Oh, thank
you.
And
Just to everybody else, I hope that you've really enjoyed today's session, and that you'll continue to watch the rest of the webinars that are coming up in the rest of the mini series. So thank you for joining us today, and remember to share it with your colleagues as well. The more people that watch, you know, the better chance we have of being able to start addressing things and getting that positive change that we need. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.